Hello and welcome back to the Out of the Park Developments YouTube channel. My name is Alex Murray and today we're going to be talking a video about scouting as we continue our tutorial series for beginners in OOTP 22. We're going to be talking very briefly about scouting. We're going to have a much more in-depth version down the road. This is just to get you started with the understanding of what scouting is in OOTP and how to use it. So if you've got your OOTP games open, let's head on in and let's take a look. Scouting in OOTP is, at its core, one of the most fundamental things you're going to be needing to understand and do in the game. Now, I've brought us into the global settings or game settings page to demonstrate just kind of the default settings that there are for this part of the game. Scouting is the way by which your team, or at least your side of the game, sees player ratings as well as sees progress or degression. You can have people advance to get, prospects get more development, or they can regress and become, as they get older and older, they will get less and less skilled in terms of how well they will play on the field. So let's first start by just generally talking about the above settings that you see right above my head up by the upper left-hand corner, and that is the scouting settings. Now, by default, normally this is what you're going to see. You're going to see scouting reports updates being done normally, which is you can speed those up to have more scouting reports or less, depending upon what you're looking for. Also, the scouting accuracy, the one down here by the bottom, can in fact be changed if you'd like it to be. Right now, and by default, it is set to normal. You can also choose to keep one report per season, or if you'd like to see all of your details, we'll talk about that in a second as well when we look at a player's scouting reports. And of course, this is going to also then move into our next video, which is going to be about development, but this is going to establish how you read development. All right, so let's first of all talk a little bit about your scouting director, which for us is Dana Brown. He is, if we go to our scouting page underneath front office, he is our scouting director. We have hired him to do all of our scouting, and as of right now, there are a couple different things we need to talk about in terms of this page. The first is how good your scout is going to heavily influence how productive and how well you read players. Every single head scout is going to have not only a reputation, depending upon how long they've worked in the league and how well their scouting has been and your team has performed, but also on top of that, they have scouting ratings that range from poor all the way up to outstanding and legendary. So you wouldn't have seen this, but basically scouting majors is going to be for just major league players, anyone who's inside of the 25 or 26-man rosters. I think 26 is the official default by now at this point, but in historical modes, it'll be 25, but that's going to be your indication of how good they are at being able to do the majors. Of course, right below that is your minors, and that's going to be able to tell you how good your scout can do minor league players. The international, which our scout is excellent at, is going to be for international amateur free agents as well as any players who come from international leagues. This would also be a good way to find out how good some of the free agents are that come over in the free agency creation period that are international, as well as any international leagues that you add to your game. Right now, ours is set up to just be MLB, but if we had international leagues, that international excellent one would actually be in use for that. And then, of course, last but not least, amateurs. That's your first-year player draft players and how well this scout can scout those people. Now, the projection is something that has been heavily talked about in the community. There are two different ways to go with that, and I actually do want to get us into commissioner mode so I can take a look at this and let you guys see. If I can go into this person, I need to be able to go into our scouting directors page. Here we go. Now, there are two different ways to go about in terms of the scouting preference, which is also known as your scouting projection. There's, as you can see on the screen, highly favor ability and highly favor tools. My apologies for that delay. I wanted to make sure that I get this correct and accurate, and I had to actually double check and make sure that I was saying this correctly because I can get these mistaken in my head. There's two different approaches to the scouting preference or projection that your scouting director is going to have. Now, you can see on our screen over to the right over there, you can see we have highly favor ability, which is just favorability, but there's also favoring tools and highly favoring tools. That is not a bad versus good range. That is a neutral preference on either way. But let me explain to you guys kind of some details about how this works from our manual, and I'll just read this off so you guys can get a clear understanding of how we understand and process favoring ability versus favoring tools. A scouting director that favors ability will base players' potential ratings on what the player can already do and project what he thinks the player will become in the future. So, that is going to be a bigger indication of basically what they are providing in terms of statistics and play at the time. The director that favors tools will base the player's potential rating on the maximum peak the player could achieve. So, favoring tools means that basically your scouting director gives you the best case scenario for this player, which a lot of people like. A lot of people like highly favored tools because that means that at the best of the best moment, this player can do this good in terms of their ratings. The highly favorability means, okay, we think that because of where they're at right now and because of where we think they could obtain, this is a much more realistic approach to how good we think this player could be. Now, they could be better, but we're going to pull that back and, temper that projection based on the actual play of the player at that moment. So you can take that information for whatever you'd like to use it for. I know some people heavily believe that highly favored tools is the one you have to go for. Personally, we've been doing our Desert Dreaming franchise and we have a highly favor ability scouting director, and that has worked quite well for us. So you can win with either or. You don't have to have one or the other. And in fact, having a neutral or someone who just favors one or the other but not highly favor may not be a bad thing. It might be good to have a mixture of both. What's more important than having your favor in one or the other, in one way, direction or the other, is making sure that your abilities, these scouting ratings, are as high as possible. All right? So if you take anything from this video, keep your scouting ratings as high as possible, and then using the information about what favoring ability and favoring tools does to your scouting director and how they view players, use that to how you want to see fit. If you're doing a rebuild, you might want highly favoring tools because that'll give you the ultimate potential projection. If you're trying to win and have a franchise that is, ready to be a dynasty year in and year out, you might be more interested in a favoring abilities head scouting director. All right. Last but not least, we've talked a little bit about what scouting is, your scouting director at this point, and we're going to talk about two more things. One is going to be your scouting budget. This is underneath that same scouting page. You are allowed to change your scouting budget to whatever you'd like if you have funds. You are required for your baseline to have $8 million by MLB. Well, the standard game is $8 million. That's a minimum. The maximum, I believe, is actually $24 million. You can't go any higher than that. Right now, we have ours set to go to 12, and you can see there's little sliders below on this page. We can adjust where our budgets go to. If we think, okay, I think we're pretty good on major leagues, we want more international, and we kind of want more amateur scouting. We can adjust our budgets to have our scouting director go in different directions and focus more of his time on different things. So, for example, it actually would be better if he did much more international because that's his strong suit. This means that he's going to be able to not only scout international players quicker, but he's also going to discover better, well, hopefully, better international prospects. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word for a second there, but international prospects with the budget. As you can see above, it actually says the amateur and international budgets further influence the quality of players discovered by your scout, both in the national, independent, and international leagues, if it's not disabled in your league settings, but by standard, you do have those. So, be aware that the first two, minor league and major league scouting, are for players already established, Amateur and international scouting are going to be all about players that are created either for your team by discovery or for the amateur draft being the first year player draft and how well you can scout those players technically. So keeping your international scouting as high as possible is a good way to try to to discover players that are just for your squad, just for your team, that no one else can pilfer from you. So little tip and advice about that. Now, let's talk last but not least, before we jump into the next video about development, let's finish up with what actually happens when you do scouting. So, if you go to a player's profile page, you can see we'll pick up Trevin Ciardo. No, you know what? No. We're picking up Christian Pache. Pache has had a very decent season for us. He had a 4 WAR, he batted 100 on his OPS+, he was a pretty good player all around. Let's go to his scouting tab, which is the third one on the second row, and you can see that he's actually been up and down a little bit this season. This is one of the best pages in OOTP, and I'm going to move myself really fast so you guys can see all of these cool information things right behind my face. So as you can see, our scout has had a whole bunch of new updates regarding Christian Pache over the course of the regular season. He's discovered that maybe he has a little more contact. That's improved up to 55. He thinks that the potential eye of Pache is up to 55. He also believes the power rating has gone up to 50 at this point. He's developing more power, developing more contact. He's becoming a better and better hitter as he's gone through the season, and that goes on top of his 80/80 defense in center field, which is so good for a center fielder. So as you can see, over time, as your scouting director does more and more scout reports about your player, because they will do them routinely over the course of the regular season, they will get new updates about players, and as your players develop or regress, they will be updated in your system. So some people that started off the season maybe only 3 stars might be 3.5 stars right now. You know, Austin Riley might be someone that's, has developed pretty nicely over the course of the regular season. He's gotten really good. We suddenly believe that he has, a little more power left to build. I think he's got a whole lot more contact. There's a whole bunch of ways that you can watch a prospect also do something very similar. So if we go to our player development and we go to our number 1 person now officially is Julio Estorja, but Pache and even someone like Blade or Langoliers would be interesting people to see how the season has gone, and these bar graphs on the right side are a great way to see how over the course of the regular season someone can go up or down depending on how your scouting reports go for those players. So that's a quick intro for how to understand and be able to read scouting and be able to understand how that affects your franchises. We'll talk in our next video about player development. We'll go deeper into those scouting reports and what that means for your players and how to better influence your development so you have the best opportunity to have your players become those 5-star potential players that you want in your system. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll have more tutorials just like this one down the road, and I'll see you all on the next one.